we've seen Drupal go so far for that. I'd like to see Backdrop continue, and I think we will continue to that we are focusing on here because of the philosophies we have in place. But I also want to see us, and now I'm starting to lose it a little on my point, but I think we can do even better, basically. I think we have an amazing opportunity here. And I'm already seeing the evidence. Like I told y'all, seeing that organization that has so little money put even 3 hours something for the community. So I'd like to see us continue to not a capitalist, capitalize on that. Leverage, exactly. Yeah, so that's my little spiel, and that's pretty much all I had to say. But yeah, thanks.
Questions for Jack?
I actually forgot a whole section. Sorry, you're gonna give me applause again. But I meant to say just about the structure of the project also means a lot. In Drupal, we have a benevolent dictator for life. That's a joke, and it's also the reality. In Backdrop, something I dug right away, I'm an anarchist, amongst other things. I'm just, on all levels controversial. And I like that there are things that are built in here to not concentrate power, to cycle people through the different roles of decision making. There's a conflict resolution chart on this main page, wherever it is. That was pretty neat. That matches up a lot with the nonprofit ethos for me. I'm like, this is cool that we are thinking about these things of how are we going to deal with healthy conflict that comes up? Where is it? So even in the structure of how all the decisions are being made, we're on the right path here to keep this really good for the constituencies that we're trying to serve. So, thanks. Yeah, do folks have any questions?
Don't be afraid to talk about being capitalist.
Huh?
Don't be afraid to say capitalist.
Oh, I'm not afraid.
Capitalize on.
I'm not afraid to say capitalist, especially if anti is in front of it. But also, in terms of ways to keep this being something to believe in, do folks have a sense of how to get plugged into Backdrop or how to support things? I'm curious about that. Words. Cool. All right. So something that's always needed is donations. Donations are easy to make, but they're kind of the smallest thing in a way that one can do. But there's a donation link on here someplace. Ways to contribute. There we go. So this is my nonprofit training. I have to talk about donations and show that. And you can get an awesome hoodie, which actually all my friends are jealous of. This hoodie is really cute. I suggest. Do we have hoodies?
They're right here.
Best hoodie possible. But you can definitely donate. But direct contribution is kind of an awesome way to get into things. And in Drupal, I've seen some articles that I haven't gotten to read recently, but I know that Benjamin Mellison wrote something recently about the barriers towards being equal, that they're really quite high. Now, Drupal.org, how to apply to be a contributor, not succeeded in doing that. I succeeded in figuring out how to contribute to Backdrop. I got feedback on how to improve quickly, actually, and it's all hub, so it's a lot to understand. So I encourage people to get involved that's not the first way, is to just check it out. Download it, give it a try, spin it up on Pantheon. That's a really easy way to do it. And see if, like we've been talking about today, you've been using that Drupal hammer for every single problem you encounter over the past many years. See if Backdrop might be a better fit for certain nails. I was really stretching the metaphor there. But give Backdrop a use. Tell people about it, spread the word, let people know that there is an alternative. It's not just Drupal, WordPress, and Joomla, which for some reason people still mention. I don't know why. And get in there with the code. It is really shockingly easy, you know, like to port something from Drupal 7 and then to find help with it. People are enthusiastic about getting it, getting found, people willing to test the things I'm porting really quickly. That barrier is way lower. Similarly, getting involved with core is, I think, a much lower barrier than in the Drupal community. Just being on GitHub alone, I don't want to understate how easy it is that like people who are familiar with development, the development world, they're going to understand this ecosystem. So get involved. Other ways to get involved. Join in on the calls, which are every Thursday. I think they're at noon Pacific or something like that. But every look at this. Look, yes, you write code, contributing code. There's a handbook. It's pretty thorough. Design help. I always hear in the calls that folks are looking for design help. So discussing, reviewing things, reporting bugs, some of the similar things that you're used to from other software projects and from Drupal are same here. But the information about the meetups are here. Weekly space to see people, to talk to each other, to look at each other's faces is actually super valuable. It's another perk of having a small but robust community. They actually happen every week, and you get to connect with folks. So, except this week.
When you go to the resources page here.
Yeah.
I was how this section here, just read that section, and it's the reason behind Backdrop, which is the whole point. So the weekly meetings that here you go to the YouTube channel, which is where all of our weekly meetings, they're done on Google Hangouts, and we do them all live broadcasting. So you don't necessarily need. Wow, this is awesome because what we're doing right now is actually. Is this happening right now? Yeah. Wow, this is so fantastic.
More or less.
How meta.
The button that says live now.
Wow, so we're actually watching us present on live streaming right now. Wow, this is amazing.
Don't point to that, you'll get sucked into the recursion.
Yeah, I was.
So scroll down to the last week. Here we go. So these are the weekly meetings, and you can see a group the people's faces, and these are the real people that are working on Backdrop. And anybody can join these meetings. If you have something you would like to express verbally, you can jump on them. You don't need to. You don't actually need to turn on your camera phone or microphone. We actually come in and chat with us if you so like. But you can also active engagement is your thing, but you'd still like to hear what's going on. These are broadcasts as they're happening. So if you visit our YouTube channel, you can subscribe, and then it'll be like, hey, guess what? Backdrop meeting is happening. You can just go over and watch it. And it's kind of like a weekly podcast almost. It's we just talk about what is happening in Backdrop.
And actually, if you watch it on YouTube, there's also a chat that we monitor, but it's separate from the chat that's in the Hangout. Very confusingly, FYI. You did actually join the meeting proper to get in.
Awesome. Well, those are some ways to get involved, and I hope y'all do. And of course, I think the rest of the afternoon, we're going to get y'all involved, talking about what to do with Backdrop next. So I think that's what we're rolling into now. Break? Cool. It might be.
Yeah, it's the last recorded.
Okay, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna do a 15-minute break. There might have been a coffee refresher, so if you guys are feeling the urge for napping, you can find that but then what we're gonna do is talk about what we want to do for the future of Backdrop. We've been working on Backdrop 1.whatever for the last 2 years, and we have to try and figure out when do we want to do a Backdrop 2 and what do we want to do in Backdrop 2, and that might help us figure out when we need to do it. So if you want to help shape the future of Backdrop, get involved right here, and we can talk about it and figure it out. We've got some whiteboards, we can draw some things and figure out how to do it. So we'll break now, and we'll come back in 15 minutes.
Cool.
So, all right.
I was going to say,
Get your t-shirts and hoodies. We don't want coffee.
Yeah, t-shirts and hoodies.
Jack, I was going to say, in city land, we have Make It Happen.
Mm-hmm.
That would be another way
Yeah.
to contribute to a module, like to give an example of.
Mm-hmm.
And if a client has need for a particular model that doesn't really exist,
Mhm.
maybe fund the happening of it.
Yeah, and the Make It Happen thing is continuing, right? It's still, Make It Happen is still continuing in Civi, right? Oh, it's up and down.
Yeah, maybe the core team is kind of
Yeah.
I just think of it as a share, as another way to contribute to the project. I don't even know, I was gonna just talk to Jenny about it.
Mhm.
I'm sure that's perfectly fine.
Yeah, no, people pooling funds to get a certain feature like notes.
Well, like was it all?
What? Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, that's basically what they did. It was essentially a trade.
Yeah, we got a lot of money in the city for a major.
Yeah.
Cool. Thank you, that was really great.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you.
Here's my controversial thought.
Yeah.
So capitalism is not the same thing as big corporations and banks. Capitalism is so much a little fee.
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I wish we didn't have to engage in capitalism. But
Well, if you like the word free market better, and I do, what free markets are what happen when there's nobody around coercing anybody else. That's it.
see, I think that coercion is inherent to the free market, actually. But
Well, this is what you envision. So you're talking to a libertarian.
got you. That makes sense.
You know where it's coming from.
Yes. Now I totally get what you're on. I'm on a similar. I'm a communist anarchist. Yeah, but economics is actually not my strong point. So I don't even try to. It is interesting though, working in a being
There's a
anti-capitalist.
total parallel like it's sort of like being parents to like being it's very different what happens between companies that are in JP Morgan. It's different because got special rules for and other rules for nobody, if you go back to those guys, with all their imperfections, read what they say, you can see it playing out right with the banks, with the government.
No, that is very true. It's true. No, thank you for sharing.
Yeah, just super.
All right, I did my bit. I get to
Good for you.
pass.
Yeah, I'm assuming, I'm guessing two people probably. Yeah.
So we also,
I checked, supposedly connection's supposed to be good. I know here, this is
These months all.
no, t-shirts are
Kind of nervous with that. Yeah. I think a session was like fast.
Yeah, don't even sweat it around Seattle. I've never do
demo and then the conversation session is just like how it's more about it's kind of a lot easier on
Yeah, that's
yeah, I much prefer this format.
really.
Actually, we could talk at in the morning. If you have any other like words or things that you want to maybe do more time. Like, you know, like say you use like Postman. So yeah, exactly. Yeah, that would be great.
It has something set up. That's what I do. Everything. So I have set up. Maybe.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and I kept this kind of as a TBD because there's a couple of things that we can move around in our first speaker.
What are they charging for this?
But so I'm hoping that also be a good chance just to show ourselves so that yeah, no, thank you so much for
Thank you for a chance.
oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, no, it's great to have you.
Yeah, that's something. That's fine. That's, yeah. There's somebody inside there.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, you can tell my camera.
Perfect.
Yeah. So I actually organized this here. So yeah, we're holding this here. I'm not actually. I'll just be trying to keep people fall asleep in the morning. Mostly like like playing my music, blaring boards, I'm sure.
And thanks for
yeah,
good.
yeah,
You gotta make the some sort of entertainment and
Yeah, it's good.
You start. Yeah, I know. That's usually
Like the UC Berkeley Center. Well, it's actually on this side of the campus. Slightly different building.
I'm sure. It's been a while since I've been on, but it used to be there.
We might have an easier time with it than you do. I think the trickiest part, frankly, is
A few more drawbacks.
no. Okay, so never mind. Come to mind. We're going to trade.
I was about to tell you that.
Are you, so are you a
For some reason, I thought that you usually want to say.
Microscopic items for the same. And I don't have a difference.
Yeah.
Then I think the trade was smart, was awesome.
But you was doing configuration.
Yeah, well, mostly I actually think it was less confusing for you that we tried to do than it's big for me because it was just like, I was like, oh wait, here is my system, it's different. So it's one of those things where it might be because it's brand new.
I just need to figure out. I just know that it takes me several years. Kind of just like, yeah, if I do this here, then this here, then I do it here. And I just, and I feel like once I connect those dots, I feel like I have enough expertise messing around with different things. Obviously, I feel like that's what I did.
Yeah, I definitely did. I probably would get some kind of thing.
Yes.
So for me, I it's like
Yeah. Where's that line? Somebody was sacrificing.
So he's not my art guy, he's just this guy. But you pick him on the episode. But I contacted the people that made the elephant, PHP elephant, and they made us a mock-up of what a plushie of our actual track would look like, and it is adorable. And they're only $10 each, but we have to order 900 of them.
Oh,
Which is
yeah.
a $9,000 investment. Where do you put 900 plushies? But he was adorable.
Yeah, so it's,
Yes, but we need the garage so we're trying to fix it. How much do we get to like stuff it full of
Yeah, but it's
Which is actually, it's like the, my experience so far. You also has been, it's been something.
Yeah.
You know, I had, yeah, I had that.
Yeah.
I'm on the board of
You just try not to talk about
Like they can't afford to pay, and then it's just hard. It's hard. It's like I want to give you this fancy platform, but you can't afford it. And then a lot of people
well, what do you suggest to your friend?
I've got a handful of like there's also a bunch of new nursing applications too, like starting at they are using the so it's something that like don't want to count. Also the test, like here, How long ago did you put it in?
It's just arrow.
I sent you an email on Monday of this week going. I think that was the same account where I'm like, can I go get on the server? So I have a client who's going on there. Like,
It's so easy.
generation of .NET, I think. Yeah.
I'm not gonna get this something else or something.
I'll start there then.
Yeah, or like
I think that's right. I think you sent me an email about that.
Load all of your.
It
is getting better. Right, yeah, and there's not even like that. Has so much more code to do anything that this is like by the time you get to and you can say, oh, I'm like this matters.
Yeah, I just.
That's the burden. It's just having.
Yeah, I think this is fine.
Well, we did think it's an end user.
Yeah, so we just ordered new t-shirts. All year, we're like, we have to new t-shirts yet.
But I mean, I can't say it's related.
We try and get that one for us.
Oh, that's word.
Oh, not quite. I'm not quite sure what it is. But for some reason, the URL function. It's because there's two things. It's like.
It's okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we usually order.
Okay. There's the laptop. Oh my god! Right, which is why, yeah,
I want all of us to have them.
Sneak around.
Okay.
Amanda, you missed it.
Do you want to leave this or do you want me to?
I want you to, but I was gonna pull up the page. Unless you want to use your computer.
Which you know is in a different location.
Yeah.
Training is like a career center. Yeah. It's on this side of campus.
This actually works.
About to find out. My phone's dead.
What? Oh, your phone's dead? Yeah, I can turn on mine.
Just trying to get on the internet.
Oh, you can XT1095, the bottom one. And then it's our password. That's right.
You get a bottle of water.
I did.
Where did you find it?
It's the last one. You can have it.
You steal it from the nonprofit summit?
I stole it from the entryway where the bagels are.
What's about there? They're for presenters, not people.
Oh, well, anyway, that's where they were. Maybe that's why there was only one.
Yeah, I'm sure. Hopefully they have other boxes now.
Oh my gosh.
The future.
Yes, the future.
Future.
Project history and future.
Did you put the date in there?
What date?
January 15th, 2018.
Yeah.
Huh. When did you do that?
January 15th, 2017.
Oh, you. When did you put in 2.0 date?
January 15th, 2017. This year.
Okay.
It used to say January 15th, 2017.
Really?
So I changed it to 18.
I don't think we should have a date at all because we have no idea.
Well, we might have for today.
But yeah, that's weird. Okay.
We can either take it down to.
All right. We're gonna start off again.
All right, everybody. I love that we're happy backdrop people chatting together. It actually makes me quite happy. But we'll stick to the schedule to kind of cover what we hope to do. Kind of round out the day. We've only got less than an hour left. Afterwards, we've been invited by the nonprofit developer summit people to go across the street into Jupiter. If you guys are interested in mingling, it happens that we share a lot of the same common interests, which is why we're in the same building together. So it would be great for us to go over and you can then rah, yay, I've got the software solution for you. Yeah, of course, they'll probably be like, no, I've got the software solution for you. And it'll be really funny because you guys have just gotten the same problem 2 ways in 2 rooms. Okay, so before we talk about, so this slide is scheduled to be like Backdrop 2.0, like what does that look like? But for a lot of people here, I think that contributing to Backdrop is a new concept for them. So before we get into like 2.0, I want to define what we've been doing in 1.0 so that you guys know what 1.0 looks like and the kinds of things that we've been doing and what kinds of things we consider to be acceptable change within the current version before we jump to the next version unnecessarily or for marketing purposes or some other reason. So we're gonna go over the history here to show you guys like what things originally were. So 1.0 was like the major thing. We were working on it for over a year before it came out. It still beat Drupal 8, which was totally shocking to me. I was like, oh crap, we're not gonna but it turns out we beat Drupal 8 by like a year, like which is pretty bananas. So 1.0 was like we broke a bunch of stuff and more stuff than we really intended to, especially because once like the principles of our project have changed since we originally came out. Like, just going to say that we've been figuring out who we are, essentially. And during the development of 1.0, it was very small, like less than 10 people, like putting this thing together. And so like we didn't really know what we stood for, why. Well, we did know we had our own personal motives of why we were doing it, but we hadn't figured out like what other people would like, how we would differentiate ourselves, essentially.
I also think most of the changes that went into 1.0 that we don't like weren't stuff we put in. It was just from the point in time that we worked, they'd already gone into Drupal 8.
Yes.
And so then in hindsight, we're like, oh, you know, it's been a year and it's been out. I really wish this language change wasn't in there, but that would have required working earlier.
Yeah, we honestly, we also made a mistake when we came out. We should have forked Drupal 7, but we forked Drupal 8, like an early Drupal 8, and that was a terrible mistake because Drupal has, well, yeah, but it took a lot of extra effort that we wouldn't have needed to put in. Eventually, we recovered from it and made it so that it was basically the same thing. But Drupal 8, or Drupal, as you know, doesn't have any policy towards backwards compatibility other than they don't have it. And so the half of the changes, like API changes, were like pre-fork, that we just inherited all of them. And then we're like, oh crap, we didn't change it, but we inherited a bunch of change that we had to mitigate a little bit. But anyway, so the 1.0, we had the configuration management system, the views, the layout system, improved performance, mobile support, updating jQuery, those things, reducing the theme system complexity, and maintain the upgrade path in Drupal 7. Which, by the way, that's a really cool demo that maybe we'll do tomorrow during training. Do we have a slot for that? For upgrading from Drupal 7, which is totally bonkers. It's just like, hey, I'm going to upgrade to Drupal 7. And it's like, think, and it's like, now it's backdrop. It's amazing. With caveats. So that's 1.0, but then like what is considered to be acceptable for the minor releases then? We have, where's our, see, we're gonna go through this entire handbook before the end of the day. So the release cycle is the one dot above here. I think everybody, or it's becoming increasingly common that people use semantic versioning for their projects these days. And in Drupal, up until Drupal 8, we didn't have semantic versioning, so it's a new concept for Drupalers. But we have the major version, and this is 3 years, but that's loose. Minor releases, that's every 4 months, and that's solid. And then patches are just like as things are needed, then we just fix individual bugs. Branch management, how we manage that, which is a big mess. Yeah, we added feature freeze. So now 2 weeks before each minor release, we no longer merge in new features, and we get it ready for the minor release. Major releases are currently intended to be made every 3 years, but this length of time has not yet officially been established as a policy. So this is what we consider to be compatibility, like in between minor versions. So you can't change the signatures of functions, you can't remove functions, you can add them. The signatures can't change. All hooks have to stay. HTML markup face the front end. Callbacks and templates, the contents of their variables. Form API properties as specified, so by hook element info. So there's also like hidden properties and internal use only properties, that those are still fair game. The following may be changed. The signatures of private functions, and private functions is not a real concept. It's just any function that starts with an underscore. We consider that to be a private function for the use of a module. The signatures of private methods, or private methods and classes. The form structures are subject to change. We can't commit basically to maintaining the perfect form structure, although we will weigh the value of changing the form structure. For something like the node form, we'd probably say no way, even though it's technically allowed. We evaluate the change and would say this is going to break too much stuff. It's just allowed, not an automatic okay. the database configuration, like tables and columns and things like that, and the settings available in settings.php. Like we can add in and change potentially the things that are available in settings.php. So okay, back to roadmap, and we can show you guys the things that we've added each release to give you an idea of that scope of things that we typically handle. Okay, 1.1. We added token module and the token UI, and we added path auto, but it's part of path module, and we redid the administration theme. So, but that was one of those funny things where it's like we couldn't remove 7, but we could change it. And so we basically just CSS'd the hell out of 7, and that was considered to be an API compatible change, even though it was a little bit bending things. 1.2, we added the rich text editor, CK editor. We added date fields and date module, and we integrated all of the date API module into core itself, link module, and email module. So a lot of these things are just like, oh, take that module. It's not quite as simple as just put it in core, but kind of similar. We also, to drive home when we put in these things, we also provided upgrade paths from all of the contrib versions. So when you upgrade from Drupal 7, like if you're using link or date or email modules, like those all just upgrade all of their variables and everything, all the configuration for them gets moved into the backdrop equivalent version. 1.3, we revamped the layout module a little bit. We added more out of the box blocks and features, more content types, more powerful configuration of content types vocabularies. This is the what we call the UX improvement, or the UX release, that we basically just focused on fixing UX problems throughout the entire system. Do you know how many? It doesn't say in here. I think we fixed like 36 or something like that, like major UX issues, which was pretty fantastic. The notification icon, which is super cool, that instead of like, well, if you have a problem right now on a Drupal website, that you have to go visit the status report to actually know that you even have a problem in the first place. But in Backdrop now, if there's an issue with your site, it just puts a little red dot in the admin bar, which is like, oh, and you click on it, it says, oh, there's something wrong with your site, which is super helpful, including security updates. Consistent terminology. Oh, and background fetch and cron jobs. That's really cool, which we haven't. Okay, gosh, the background fetch thing is so cool though. It's basically, it works, it's fantastic for shared hosting, sorry. Okay, 1.4. 1.4 is when we added all of the new layouts. So we added a bunch of new layouts that we've been seeing today that are all based on Bootstrap 4, which is really pretty cool because it's really easy to make new ones. Automatic and manual path, redirect module. We added project browser, which allows you to install, like we saw earlier. Layout module, more improvements with terminology, and better conditional configurations, more UX improvements, basically. 1.5, we got the new front-end theme called Basis, which was basically this guy right here, Wes. Thank you, Wes. New homepage layouts, responsive and drop-down menus, emoji support, yay. And then some other smaller issues. So 1.6, that's the new version coming up. We're working on references module, which is, we already have contrib versions of node reference and user reference module. We don't have any new reference support yet, but yes, but the module that we're working on right now, there's a contrib module called reference that we're targeting for core inclusion. That will be like the generic reference module for Backdrop in the future. Add a file and management user interface, more rich text editor improvements.
Step 1 of media.
Yeah, and more to be determined. 1.7 is an open board. Yeah, and then 2.0 is just like this vague thing. So essentially, like adding new features is typically the reason people upgrade to new versions of Drupal. But that has changed with semantic versioning. That's like we can add new features kind of whenever we want, as long as we don't break the existing old features. what has been happening in some cases is that as we've been adding more stuff, we've been acquiring more crufts. We do have a policy in Backdrop of deprecated, like an @deprecated PHP doc on functions that have, or functions or parameters that have been removed or that will go away. So we've actually got a fair number of functions in Backdrop that are just kind of hanging out that aren't used anywhere. Like a really good example of that is, oh gosh, my phone is, oh here, maybe if I take it out and put it over here, it'll get a little closer to the window. Not sure this is gonna work. So we have the API website, which is api.backdropcms.org. It's kind of similar to the API website for Drupal. But if you find any function like variable set, for example, we still have variables, but we don't use them. Like the variable table still exists for backwards compatibility's sake, but there's nothing in it. Modules that aren't fully ported to Backdrop to use the configuration management system still use variables, but they are, as you can see, there's just this flag in here that just says deprecated. Or maybe making that a big red error would be more appropriate. But we say deprecated in the version since it has been deprecated.
I've been taking notes.
Good. Is that the extent of it?
That's just what you said so far.
Yeah. So some of the suggestions, this Drupal is facing this too, but in a much more extreme way, because I don't think we're going to see Drupal 9 for a long time, like maybe like a decade. I'm not exaggerating. I think that Drupal 8 is going to be like the Mac OS 10 kind of thing. It's just going to stick around forever. But the thing is, like, well, that might be us too. It's like, do we, what sort of changes actually warrant like making a 2.0 release? And there's been some points brought up of that having a new big version number is good for marketing reasons. It's like, oh yeah, it's like the new version, and you can make a big deal about it because every new minor version just doesn't seem that exciting. For comparison, also, WordPress doesn't have major versions at all. They do have, like, I don't know what WordPress is up to, 4.6 or something higher probably. They also do 3 releases a year, by the way.
84.
They have 4 now?
Yeah.
They did 3 when we based our model off of them.
I think they do.
Okay, well maybe they do 4 of them now. So, but the thing is, when they get to like 2.9, they just roll over into 3.0, but there's no difference, like substantial difference between 2.9 and 3.0 as there is between like 2.8 and 2.9.
But there's a big psychological difference to the people who are using it. And I don't understand that mumbo jumbo, but I like to copy things that work from other people. So,
yeah, although WordPress is not semantic versioning in any sense because they don't have major
people don't
versions.
understand that anyway.
Yeah.
There is a team, I think there really is a huge difference psychologically between one. It's not so much between one version and another. It's more like if you're coming to a new technology and it says 1.1, you think this guy's just started. I shouldn't waste my time. And that's the C4 sampling. We kind of feel the same thing on 1.x. It leaves you stuck. At the same time, like if you're going to choose a major number means a major
Change.
paradigm shift. It's kind of like thinking, well, we're going to take all the concepts. We're going to start by taking all the concepts we're trying to accomplish with Backdrop as a technology, separate those ideas from the code completely, figure out what we need to do differently than we did before, and then see what worked before, what we were doing before that still works, and what needs to be done differently. But we're willing to go through everything we have to because it's a major conversion. And I think I kind of feel like what we got going on here is something that's really targeting people who don't have a lot of time or money to make a lot of updates and changes. We want something that's going to be more or less the same for a very long time. And that might not be, they might want to go with the first philosophy, WordPress style philosophy, and let's just look at the number of units. That's
So we also, a year ago, went to Madrid. And I went to Symphony Live, and we got up close and personal with the Symphony core developers and kind of asked them a bunch of questions about how they solved their backwards compatibility philosophy. And they have a very interesting model too, where every current version of Symfony contains all of the APIs from the previous version of Symfony marked as deprecated. So it gives the entire community an entire major release to get caught up. So if we wanted to adopt a similar policy in something like Backdrop, it would mean that any Backdrop 1 module would work on a Backdrop 2 site. But as soon as you updated to Backdrop 3, your Backdrop 1 modules would stop working, and your Backdrop 2 modules would keep working. And so it breaks the model that we have now, and like all of the way the core currently works doesn't do that because we inherited Drupals. But it's kind of interesting from a philosophy standpoint to be like, well, what if we just left all of those APIs in there and just marked everything deprecated? And then the process of creating Backdrop 3 just means we go and delete everything marked deprecated. Like it isn't necessarily introducing any new changes. It's just deleting old
I think we have our position right now with basically Drupal 7 is our last major version. And I feel like since we are trying to pitch ourselves as the way to go for people with Drupal 7 sites who want to upgrade and not go Drupal 8, we can't break that.
I would agree, especially also Backdrop is really young right now too, so there's not too much at stake. But I think maybe by the time Backdrop 3 rolls around, we might have to have this conversation all over again and figure out what we're going to do. I wouldn't recommend deleting the Drupal compatibility layer from Backdrop 2, even if it comes out as early as next year. I think that's too soon. If there's going to be so many Drupal 7 sites that are still around, we want to keep that upgrade path in there as long as possible. But the upgrade path and the backwards compatibility layers don't have to be different. Like we could still have an upgrade path that would get you from Drupal 6 to Backdrop 3, or whatever it is we end up having by then, and not have Backdrop 1 modules work too. Yeah. We would just need to be super clever about how we made that happen.
So we have like 2 upstreams.
In terms of when to shift away from Drupal 7 compatibility, I think you're looking at when Drupal 7 is officially deprecated plus a year. Like when they actually say we are no longer supporting security patches,
end of life,
etc. End of life. That plus maybe a year and a half. And that's
we do also need to be careful about what happens if Drupal 7 is never end of life.
Never?
Never. Just throwing that out there as a possibility. Like Drupal 8 is very different from Drupal 7. There are going to be a bunch of people that don't want to leave Drupal 7. What if Drupal adopts a policy by the time Drupal 9 comes out that says we're going to maintain security fixes for Drupal 7 forever?
Then that's like a major win for you because you basically get a free flow of both technology and users for people who try Drupal 7 and say, it's just quite for me. Oh, this Backdrop thing and it's easy switch.
Yeah.
That's like your win. You win.
But I think that means we would then never remove the backwards compatibility layer or the upgrade path from Drupal.
There's nothing saying that you can't have you can't leave Backdrop 1, people leave Backdrop 1 through the 7, and then they come to Backdrop 3.
Yeah, which is what Drupal has traditionally done. It's like you want to go from Drupal 6 to 8, you got to go through 7. Well, actually, that's true for 8.
5 to 7?
You want to go from 5 to 7, you have to go through 6 first. Yeah.
So you can certainly leave, Backdrop 1 or 2 or whatever in there as a jumping point from Drupal 7, maybe a little bit more conversion than
So for front-end stuff, there's all sorts of things I want to break. Mostly like markup, like there's all the terrible markup. It needs to go.
We also might need to differentiate like APIs versus markup in a way that we haven't ever done before in order to make those kind of changes possible. And we should consider carefully the ramifications of changing the stuff that happens on the front end, because I agree, like the front end changes the fastest in terms of web technology, like PHP is forever, at least right now for the whole future. But making it easier for us to be able to make changes there, I think, is going to be important too.
And if people can speak loudly, then our internet friends can hear us.
Well, I think that the big if we wanted to make a jump to 2x and even not break backwards compatibility in the back end, like basically releasing a new front end paradigm of like progressively decoupled themes that are basically running JavaScript and pulling from Drupal as a backend, like, API.
And so another thing is like there's layout's just going to change drastically in the next 2 or 3 years. Like how it works with CSS. I think that's going to be a good reason to make a breaking change release, like a probably major release. And then I think just getting rid of like, why on earth does item list have a title? Why is the title its own thing? Like that kind of thing just drives me freaking bonkers. And then just markup decisions that make for worse CSS. That means that the CSS is harder to maintain for people downstream of the core, which is everyone.
Yeah.
And I had like a whole sheet of things that I want to change. And browser support is the other reason. I think browser support we should probably only change on major releases. I'm guessing.
Like if we want to drop support for
If I want to drop for IE.
It depends on how long our release cycles are. Like, browsers are now kind of going away and then coming up, fast enough that it's like you could drop support for the last version of, IE or Firefox, it has like 20 versions a year. So
Well, IE is dead, and Edge will be in the same paradigm as Chrome and Firefox. So that's what we won't worry about. Safari is still an idiot.
and it's tied to the operating system version, which is even worse. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, basically IE was too. But yeah, I mean, in a couple of years, IE won't matter. Like right now, looking at the stats, I recommend that for version 2, we're IE 11 and up, which is the last version of IE.
I mean, even Microsoft doesn't actually support anything that's below IE 11 anyway. That's January 16th of this year or something like that. Yeah, everything they killed support for everything below IE 11 officially.
Yeah, I do think it would make sense to be in line with the vendor support. That's like if the vendor's not supporting it, we really should be supporting it. Although, funny story about that, vendor supporting it is PHP versions. BADCamp works with PHP 5.3 and higher, which Drupal 8 works with 5.6 now. Yeah, so which actually is the currently supported versions of PHP. But the crazy thing is, and why we support PHP 5.3 is because we're based not on PHP support, but based on
reality.
Well, based A on reality and B based on operating system support. So like Red Hat and CentOS community and the Ubuntu and Debian communities supports like if they have an LTS release like 14.04 of Ubuntu, for example, then they support that for a long time. Like CentOS is really crazy. Their stable releases can go from like 10 years and there's an additional like 8 years on top of that. So it's actually really kind of bananas. Like how
I think we should base our support of something on the actual usage numbers if we can find them.
Brilliant.
Yeah, so I did that, but I don't know how trustworthy it is, and it'd be better if our audience ends up making a lot of internet and all those people are stuck on IE 11, then maybe we should keep support for that for longer.
Yeah.
So it's almost like a survey, like here's what I think based on the data from Wikimedia, Stat Counter, W3C Counter, Backdrop.org, and Molobot.com, and somebody else please tell me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think like getting accurate sources for a lot of this stuff is going to be super hard, and also in terms of like what features are necessary to add and like what saves or removes, whatever. And we should try and get information from as much sources as possible. If we have to build our own counters for things or send out polls or whatever, we should try and make sure we get an accurate count of our users versus vendor support. I think it's dangerous.
I don't think it's wise necessarily to use the algorithm for whether to use one kind of technology like front end technology as the same as the back end algorithm for PHP and Ubuntu and OS decisions are a vastly different thing than browser support.
Yeah. I agree, but my point was just that like there are people that use PHP 5.3, so just because the vendor doesn't support it, we do a disservice to all those people if we didn't support 5.3. Same thing with browsers. If there are people that are still using IE8 5 years from now, it's a significant portion of people, we should probably still support it.
Or and like this,
Because that's a pain point that I know I felt as a developer of Drupal 7 sites or whatever it was. We were like, does it run on IE8? And I'm like, oh God, we have to tell you IE8 support. That was the kind of thing where it was really important to them as a business, and it was something as developers we did not want to do, but we had to do it anyway. And I feel like if we're looking at that for Backtrack, we can't say, oh, we're removing this support because that it's not supported by the backs, but it is supported by our audience. That's work that we're putting on the community to build back into the software that we've removed, which I think goes against our philosophy of valuing end users over developers.
Well, I mean, like, that, Dan, go ahead.
Well, flip side of that is speaking as a user, speaking to making business decision about whether it uses the concept. Absolute compatibility is less important to me than just what it's going to cost. So, you know, and the hard part of this is knowing, is the lack of knowledge of who's doing what. That might be solved with instrumentation. Which I'd probably consent to as long as I, probably just consent to, as a site user, you're going to instrument my site to built into the background and work for the purpose of compatibility and so on. As long as you're pretty careful about what you instrument. That's one thing. And then the other part of this is being able to estimate if there is a breaking change, what it will cost me to change it. I'm just trying to indicate that from a user standpoint, like I think redundant, there would be some flexibility. I'm willing to invest something, it's just a big
Exorbitant. Yeah.
So cost change is more important than compatibility, really. But compatibility is a way to mitigate costs. Like it really should be driven by the time savings, not driven by the rules. Yeah, like that's an interesting perspective, although difficult to enforce.
But it's also in line with what we've already done, right? Like our philosophy does not say must be backwards compatible. It says backwards compatibility is important.
Yes.
And that's because it's a factor that weighs in with everything else. It's not something that we're guaranteed to commit to. We want to make it easy. We want to make it fast. We realize that there are some cases where it doesn't make sense to be strict on backwards compatibility.
yeah, one real quick thing, just about front-end stuff before we're completely away from that. It was supporting a wide range of things in core is really difficult. Like as far as like if I have to support IE8 all the way up to like, 4 years, that's hard. But it would be easy to say core out of the box supports this stuff in the last like 3 to 4 years. Then we also provide like a theme or something that can be a compatibility layer for these old browsers, because I can write something that works for those using the language they know really easily, but having to do this whole gamut is a giant pain.
So that's interesting. So we have this stuff in core right now where we add like first, last, even odd classes.
Mm-hmm.
If we shifted that to Bartik, right?
Mm-hmm.
That would then like Bartik would be your IE8 support,
Mm-hmm.
and we could remove it from anything using basis.
Mm-hmm.
It does require that we keep a whole bunch of these like old, potentially not as good themes in core, which might look weird from a first time user experience where it's like you can have the good theme or the old theme or the really old theme or the really, really old theme.
Yeah.
Where you want their experience to be like 5 good options, and maybe that's not what's left.
Or and there might be ways to handle that, like the UI or something. But,
Yeah.
just present them as good because they allow me to support these old things that we.
Yeah, I'm not sure how much of it, like documenting a theme affects somebody's impression of it. It's like what it feels like. But yeah, there might be other ways to crop. Like if we already did an update to Bartik in terms of like visual stuff, if we continue to make it look modern, even if the code worked on, like there are ways around that. It's just more work to do.
Mike, you had something to say?
Well, I was going to say, like, I think we need to, it sounds like we sort of randomly come across stuff that we want to deprecate.
Yes.
And it's not super we're often just sort of stashing them. Right now, we're stashing them in the 2x branch, as in like get rid of this, get rid of that. And perhaps we just need like a separate milestone just to store the things that we want to deprecate, and perhaps even make sure those issues are saying like what's keeping us from doing it, and like when we should evaluate doing it and stuff like that, and maybe come up with more of a workflow for deprecation.
I think that is a good idea. It would be great if we could figure out like what the hell we're doing in terms of helping figure out how that workflow happens. Like, are we allowed to deprecate anything outside of a major version? Are we gonna not deprecate anything for 2 major versions? Can we deprecate it after 1? Like how, like does a theme function markup? Do we need to create a new theme function with a new name and deprecate the old? Like how do you handle, there's a bunch of parse problems we need to think about in order to help us create the workflow.
What if you mentioned like in your things of like on the page, the philosophy page with the major versions and minor versions, what did it say about markup?
It said like
Front-end markup is considered an
markup as
API
opposed
change.
to administrative markup should be changed.
But yeah, and again, it's like this is like within our ability to change if we so decide. Let's see, where's its release cycle? Yeah. But again, it's like all of these things, like in order to do this, we need to have an issue saying we would like to change this, and then we
need to talk about it.
And then we talk about it, and then ultimately for something like this, it would be gather community consent, not consensus, gather community input, and then move it to the PMC for voting. But that's a big difference between Backdrop and Drupal is that in Drupal, they basically require consensus, which basically ultimately ends up in somebody shouting the other person down until they shut up. And then saying, all right, we have consensus because that person's not talking anymore. And then that's considered like, yay, that everybody's on the same page here, like let's go forward.
And they leave the community.
Yeah, it's one of the, yeah, so in order to try to make it that like we collect input and then we have the decision making be like a frequent thing. And it's like people can be disappointed in the decisions of the PMC, but that's better than being shouted out of the community. Not necessarily shouted out, but that does happen from time to time. So anyway, markup, on the front end is considered to be that. I mean, we can do all kinds of clever things though. We changed all the markup for all the layouts, for example, by making a new set of layouts. So there's the layouts that you see today are Bootstrap based, but if you install Backdrop 1.0, you only have 4 layouts and they're not Bootstrap based. And what happened is if you were running a prior version to 1.4, when the new layouts were added, 1.3, then when you upgrade, nothing happens. You still see your 4 layouts, but we added 10 new ones, but they're not turned on. And so then you turn on the 10 new ones, and then now you have 14, the old ones and the new ones. But then if you stop using the old ones and turn them off, then they disappear from the user interface. And so they're no longer, like that's why you don't see them when you're on a new site. So new sites get the new stuff, old sites continue using the old stuff, unless they intentionally turn on the new stuff, turn off the old stuff, and then the old stuff disappears just like it would on a new site. And we could manage magical things like that for markup too. We could make a new secret base theme that if you don't specify base theme, all of the themes use the base theme that contains all the deprecated markup. And then we can make a new, then core itself with no theme no theme in theory would be the new markup. But it'd be interesting because you'd have to like somehow indicate in the theme, like what your base theme really is, which is not the.
I mean, the only thing to worry about is that it just needs to,
it's
like with kidney transplants.
There's a rejection.
No, when you get when your kidneys are failing and you get a kidney transplant, they don't actually take out your kidneys; they just pack more kidneys into you.
Whoa.
Yeah, and then you end up with more and more kidneys.
I did not know this.
Yeah.
So that analogy.
So
as long as there's room for kidneys.
So I feel like we just have to make sure that we don't have all of these like unused, not really working kidneys in core.
Or that we have a policy for like when it's safe to remove them. And if we said like, you have to keep all of the kidneys until backtrack 2 comes out, and then you can remove the oldest kidney. And then when backtrack 3 comes out, you can remove the next oldest kidney.
Or I think this is something that we can use the statistics module for to
Right.
report on what things are enabled.
Yeah.
And even maybe actually for some functions, like, sneak a counter into deprecated functions that actually count if they're being used or not, and report back to the statistics module
We
that way.
did recently add something that would notify you if you're using deprecated functions. That would not be very hard to do.
Yeah, so actually logging all the deprecated functions that people are using.
Yeah. That's a great way to track actual people versus policy.
So kidney is now an official backdrop slang word?
It's what we use instead of technical debt.
Well, technical debt's not the right word for it because it's like.
That's what they call it in your book. I
A
think we should
kidney
call it
layer.
kidneys.
There we go.
Kidney
Yeah,
layer.
so we
Layer.
Kidney layer. How much of the kidney layer do we take out?
Well, you could call it kidney litter. You call it kitty litter and kidney.
Kidney
Take out, clean out the kidney litter.
Why is it important to maintain HTML markup in a way that you maintain? I just don't, like, who's depending on HTML markup?
So that's an excellent question. And I think part of the issue is that our markup comes from so many different places. Like some of it comes out of like the system inside of Backdrop, and some of it comes from core modules, and some of it comes from core themes. And so if you're creating a contrib theme, you write a whole bunch of CSS. It's dependent on the markup that's on the page when you write the theme. And then if we change something like deep inside core, it's going to change what you have on your page. And if your CSS can't target anymore, your site is now sort of broken.
But not really broken.
Right.
I feel like it's
Air
like,
quote.
yeah, like, I feel like if you change
Right.
like, if you change a function call or something like that, like you actually have like
Yeah, great.
you actually have PHP errors flying up or
Yeah.
even like white screens or something like that. Whereas like, so I mean, I feel like we
Much
definitely have
worse.
to keep those functions there. Whereas like the markup, it's like polite to not change it,
Yeah.
but if we need it, we can.
Yeah.
So I feel like maybe we should move that from the does not change to the may change.
That's one thought. Another thing too is we could be clever about theme function themes too, right? Where we have this thing called item list.
Right.
If we just create a new thing called list.
Right.
And deprecated item list. Anyone running item list would still get their stupid title.
Right.
And anyone running list would just get a nice clean
And
signature.
div wrapper.
Right. There's some stuff like that we can do some cleanup on without breaking APIs, but we can still
If you can get rid of all the wrappers, we could have a full screen.
No.
No, you wanted to add extra wrappers. That's the opposite. of
yeah.
getting rid of wrappers.
Yeah, that's what he's saying.
Oh.
Yeah, you got rid of them. I added.
We need more wrappers.
Yep.
Oh, I thought you said you.
Yeah.
All right.
There would be reason to just classify and classify differently API changes and HTML markup changes.
Yeah.
Because they have different.
Yeah. I agree, and I think that's what Mike was getting at too. Is like we can rework that list of what changes and what doesn't change. And we can weigh every single change too, like the item list versus list is the easy one because you can create a new function. But changing like other things in format might be really hard and be like, well, let's just fix the markup and not replace it. Like so, depending on how crazy the change is, we might evaluate doing it differently based on the impact it's going to have downstream.
Like one thing I would want to say is like, okay, we can change what the tag is. Like, okay, this is better as article and not div, so we're going to make an article. But we won't change the amount of tags. Like we won't take out a wrapper or something, and we won't change the class names. So like just don't style
Style
div.
the item.
Yeah,
use
don't
the
don't
selector,
yeah, don't style div dot thing. Just style dot thing, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, and I think that's something that would be really smart for us to do anyway. There's a whole bunch of legacy CSS that could be fixed if we were allowed to change it. Yeah.
Well, actually, I have been changing.
And
a lot.
we did change some of that in the move from 7 to Backdrop because we had to change some of the markup to make it more more semantic. So every time we ran into markup, we changed it from CSS and fixed the CSS. But that doesn't mean there's not a bunch of bad CSS and more stuff that should be updated.
We just ran into div.contextual.
Oh yeah,
We killed it.
nice. Okay, did you have a specific?
No.
So I would like to talk about how important the numbers are and a timeline for when we should change our numbers. Because that'll help us figure out that, you know, oh crap, we have to do this in a year. It sounds kind of scary to me, but I don't know, like, right now, we have like originally we estimated it would be 3 years between major releases, but that's a year from January. Do we actually need to change anything? Anyone other than Wes? I feel like no. I feel like the things that you hate, we can write a theme for. Like that's not. I know.
You haven't seen my list yet.
I haven't seen your list, and I'm also not a front-end developer, so I just feel like whatever, it's ugly. Okay. But I don't know, like the majority of the people that use Backdraft, like if we want to make it more like the world of WordPress where there are 100,000 beautiful themes, like maybe your opinion is really valid. And because I come from Drupal where we don't give a crap about our horrible themes available, like my opinion is maybe not valid. So I don't know how we, I don't know how we quantify that. I don't know that we need to.
I'd say for me, for my purposes of wanting a 2x, I care more about what's in it rather than the timeline.
Okay.
Like there are these things where I'm like, I really want this. Like there are other things like this would be nice, but like there's a couple where it's like this. So.
Okay.
Like what? What can't
Can
we
you give
do?
us an example?
What can't we do until we get to 2x?
Okay,
We
so
really want.
this one takes explanation, but I want Ben classes for all core markup because it'll make everything that comes from core Ben classes. So anyway, it's a CSS thing. It's a class naming, but what it does is it makes it so that your specificity coming out of core will be insanely low, which means everything built on top of core doesn't have to use them. They can do whatever how they want, but their classes they don't need to like write crazy stuff to like actually override
These
styles.
these are the classes that make double hyphens and
Double
underscores.
exactly. It's just something that'll scale really nicely and make it so that the people who build on top of the system don't have to know or care about this, but it'll make it a lot better for anyone building a theme, anyone messing with CSS at all.
You mean actually using CSS to cascade styles?
Yeah, right? And not just get like in a specificity wars over.
So Wes, you're suggesting, I've never heard of that before, but it's this.
Changing every class name basically
Okay.
to follow a certain system.
The idea is to get rid of
And
the
that
get rid
it's
of
like,
important.
that one I don't feel strongly about, and I want to know other people's because I could be way off on that.
See, I think like the things about them that are great is the fact that the elements don't just the way that you do the markup, so they don't depend on where they're in. So they don't say like like header, menu, whatever else like that. You just say okay, a menu, and it's going to look like this wherever you put it, and then have like. So I think the philosophy of how it creates the styles and how it like modifies them, like then you create a green thing, so all menus that are green get this green class. Like I feel like that's the more important part than the actual class names. I think the class names with all the extra dashes and stuff like that end up just being clutter and unimportant.
It's fair. So I agree with Mike. Sorry, but I wonder, like, is this the kind of thing you think that like there may be weird browser support for in the future, where it'll look for like something in?
No, this is purely organizational, and it really does a really good job of getting you low specificity. Like no style from core should have more than 2 classes in it.
What if we put 18 classes on every div?
Well,
We have a solution to this problem.
wait.
And then does actually result in potentially a few more classes on things than default Drupal 7. So, but that one's I feel like I should probably think through a little clearer, and then people could be like, and I'll be like, all right, but then there'll be like
It would
ways I
also-
can get what I want that I'm trying to get out of BEM a different way.
Yeah.
Because like
I like
Ben's
the
just
theory.
yeah,
I don't really
Ben's
care
just
about
something
the
that's already
implementation.
solved. They've already thought through. It's a really good extensible system of just how you name things. That's all it is, the naming convention.
Yeah.
I feel like it's also a way to think about how you actually write the markup and how things, knowing or not knowing their place within the page.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I also think that, so there's, this is a huge amount of change, right? Like if we change all of the classes.
Every single class
saying
would
2.0.
That's, yeah, every single class.
But, I mean, even 1 to 2, like that might be too much change for backdrop. Because how much of your theme is gonna be compatible if you had a theme for backdrop? So I think it will be the kind of thing where we need to kind of very carefully weigh that. and be like, what is the benefit?
If we're lowering the specificity of core CSS, any overrides in the theme should still be overriding.
Yeah, I actually don't care if the old classes are still there. I
Okay.
just want core specificity to be crazy low.
This doesn't really sound like it's something that if you imposed it on people, that would actually change anybody's site that was already set up a particular way. It just adds the ability, correct me if I'm wrong, it just adds the ability to, once it's there, target this or that or the other differently, but it doesn't affect, it just doesn't affect anybody who's
What would
already done something.
changed all the classes, but it wouldn't if we added.
Yeah,
Exactly.
But then you have a class soup kind of thing, which is like,
But people already object to that, but I don't know, like, I would love to look at, like, 100 WordPress themes and see, like, what class styles do they use, like, is there enough specificity, like, how big a mess is the real world? And see, I know, I have a feeling it's bad, but I wonder if it matters, right? Like, if the WordPress world is a mess, and it's still super successful, like maybe class soup is the least of our problems.
Yeah.
We need to make it the easiest possible,
Like,
people do whatever.
what are our users actually having problems with?
Right.
If it's really an issue, just put a checkbox that says enable BEM.
Or we
And
can-
then you get class soup, and then if you don't want BEM, then you don't get class soup, you get no BEM, but, you know.
A couple
let's check it out.
Yeah, a couple quick questions. One for other folks who might be interested, this BEM thing is block element modifier, and it's a methodology for CSS. So just to clear that up, I never heard of that before. So this is kind of like and there's a getEEM.com website about it. So this is like a meta question for me to understand, because this stuff is kind of new for me. You brought this up, the BEM idea, as something that should wait until 2.x instead of being in this one. Why is that? Because it's such a big change, or like, I'll let you.
It would go along with the CSS rewrite. Like, I just want to
It
rip
doesn't
out.
have to.
I want to.
Okay, but the CSS rewrite is what has to wait for 2, right? We could add whatever the hell classes we wanted
Right.
in 1.x whenever we wanted, if we thought that would be.
Yeah, it basically sets me up to do a good CSS rewrite.
Right.
That's why I want it.
And the CSS rewrite is also not a API break, right? It's the markup that's the API break. So we could, in theory, I'm not recommending we actually do this, but we could like replace all of the CSS in basis with new CSS in like background 1.8 or something, in theory. So it would be interesting to figure out like what the steps are and see, can we solve all of the problems you're actually facing with these classes, even if we don't do a CSS rewrite, and then the CSS rewrite would be a test to see if we actually solve all the problems or not, I don't know.
Well, I feel like the BEM sort of philosophy would sort of help guide our core changes, because like basically the block element modifier thing is like, basically it's saying it's like you work on a button style, and then that button style, wherever a button is placed in the site, it has that style.
Yeah.
So it's like more making things rather than a button looking with the class looking like different on 2 different forms.
Yeah.
And having like extra form things.
Isn't
So like,
that just like good development? though?
yeah.
Like,
So
It
that's
is.
the thing.
This is a way with naming just to kind of structure your thinking, and it also it ties in well with this kind of like this panel-y thing. Like each one of those is a component, a block, right? So in Drupal 8 they call it CEM, but it's BEM. But so like you have
Okay.
yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, but, so, if I may,
Yes.
and again, I'm speaking more as I have one hat on as a technologist and another hat on as a business owner and user, and so I'm speaking with the latter hat on. I get all this stuff and I don't care. We have a group here, we have a limited amount of time, and you're talking about the future of Backdrop. And I don't know how often we get a chance to do this, but to me, there are bigger issues and then another set of much bigger issues and then another set of much bigger issues than anything to do with success markup. It's been the issue and it would affect us, and so on, but what I want to know is will Backdrop survive and prosper in the future in a significant way? And underlying that is questions like, right now, a couple things. First of all, Backdrop, as conceived, is a tiny part of the universe where sort of Drupal is pretty big here, and WordPress is 12 times bigger than Drupal in terms of installs. And so the question of will Backdrop continue to have a Drupal 7 compatibility layer? That's kind of important, and like it wouldn't exist without it. The whole rationale, the momentum behind this, the Backdrop depends on that. If you had a WordPress upgrade path of some kind, I think that would give you a 10x, further impetus. And I think that's so much more important than CSS in general, right?
Like, was bringing that up at lunch today too. He's cheering behind you. Yep.
And a whole bunch of other things, like I was asking earlier about, is there going to be a good e-commerce solution for Backdrop? That's not as big as that one, not as big as the WordPress one, but it's a pretty big one.
Yeah.
So
I
it's
think
really
this,
time to talk about these things.
this can happen at any time. This doesn't have to be built in core. And as soon as it does happen, we can put it in core. Because it's not going to change any of our APIs.
Where's the resource, schedule, the desire, the drive to make it happen? Because I don't know, like, it depends on what's important to you. Like, if it's important to you for this project to really, really become a big deal, be really successful, I would go where the most important.
So my point is that this isn't really relevant to our conversation right now.
Well, it kind of is, because it's like a big fancy feature that, like, you could say, back 2.0, now WordPress compatible,
We did too.
Yeah, we
This
could,
year,
but-
1.6 now WordPress compatible.
Well, 2.0 sounds a little more amazing. It's like we're saying.
Yeah.
What are we saying? That was like my original.
Yeah, that was the original question. It's like, should we declare Backdrop 2.0 at some arbitrary point, like when you make it a WordPress upgrade path or have something else?
Yeah.
And like we cross that bridge, like a lot of this discussion is just sort of like us just sort of thinking through this stuff, I think.
Yeah.
And less like we're not going to come to any decisions here.
No, but it's good to get feedback from people we wouldn't normally.
And I
talk
agree.
to.
I mean, this comes to more fundamental.
I mean, just because you're not in our weekly meeting.
Yeah.
I would love to talk to you every week if you would like to join our weekly meetings. I think you have great feedback, and obviously you're steering us in directions we haven't pointed in. So thank you.
The other thing, I just wanted to pick up on some of that thread. I mean, I don't know how much more time we're going to be here all together in this unique opportunity. Maybe it's not about it could be done anytime or just getting into the weeds. It's like, what are the things that we around the room think would be advantageous based on our experience? Because obviously we don't necessarily live and breathe kind of your roadmap and your principles, but maybe, like Dan said, there's a business principle, there's but maybe it's just better if we just shift gears for a few minutes into like pure brainstorming.
Like priorities.
Not like having to hear Wes make something or anybody else make something. Just get the information.
The whole thing that got us on the BEM path was a very good question of, like, given core stability being maybe a priority, what things are out there realistically change core, and that's warrant a deprecation path and different major versions. And I think getting into the weeds on BEM was instructive in that it made us think, well, does this actually have to be a core change? Can this be a layer change? Do we care if we add some cruft so that we can avoid the core change? I think these are all very important questions, and I think the BEM thing is useful in just that it's a good exploration of fine example of this.
I maybe have another one. I want to do some UI overhaul. So like, do we need tabs? Could everything be contextual? Contextual could look better and be better. Can I do that? And that kind of like, the UI might significantly change. I feel like isn't addressed in the philosophy, but I feel like should be a breaking change. Does that make sense? Like if the UI fundamentally changes,
So wait, should we brainstorm things that should be breaking changes? Or should we brainstorm like priorities for the project and then try and figure out like if they're breaking changes? Or, because we are short on time, and I don't want to get too much into your list, because I know.
well, that was the only other one
Yeah.
that I thought was breaking, which is why I brought it up.
I kind of feel like that wouldn't be, just because it's the user experience improvement. But I feel like there's a lot of debate to be had there. And I think that like trying to figure out what we should do with our 5 minutes might be more of a priority than having that debate.
Sure, yeah.
So what should we focus on for the last 5 minutes to make sure that we get the most out of the group that we have in this room now? Should we talk about what Backdrop's priorities should
I
be?
encourage, yeah, Backdrop's priorities kind of going off of Neil's question, because it's a little less like, will it break it, or like coming up with stuff that'll break things. It's more like, I don't know, I'd love to hear from people in the room, like, what's important for them for Backdrop right now? Like, what's stopping you from using it? What's gonna make it a lot easier to use it? That's what I wanna talk about, but also what I wanna hear about.
To reiterate his point, from what I've seen, I've just kind of jumped in to, explore, see what Backdrop's about. From what I've seen so far, it seems like it's like Drupal and WordPress had a baby, and it has kind of the best of both worlds in some ways. There's some bias for us, web developer tools put in, but it's also understanding the end user who's going to be using the product and doesn't like throw all this other stuff in their face where it's just like, what do I do here? So I just said, just to reiterate, WordPress like upgrade path seems like a strong selling point if you really want to push for the power of Backdrop.
Okay, yes.
And I think that community outreach has to be one of our big things, because like look at the summit, like it's nice we have all these people here, but this is kind of like the same number of people as last year. So like I'm not sure. Like I know our community has grown, but we have to make sure it grows a bit more to make sure it's sustainable. I'm not saying well, you should go into like Drees land where like Drupal is going to take over the internet. We're gonna like have run like 80% of the websites by 2050, stuff. But just like I think we do need some more growth, and more outreach, and get more Drupal people converted.
I don't know how to actually make that happen, which is why it's not happened.
Well, that's not part of that's not part of the conversation right now.
Yeah. But growth is a priority.
It's not about how. It's like
We're setting the priorities.
Right.
Well, I mean, what are the narratives? Right now, the narrative for who uses Backdrop are small, medium-sized businesses, nonprofits, and maybe government organizations that have a low profile. And I think that the way you grow the community is by identifying what the narratives are that you can hit, as opposed to the ones you're already targeting, and you figure out how to streamline everything in regards to those narratives. You really focus on it. You guys have already done a great job of that for the small to medium businesses, nonprofits, and other low profile organizations.
There's definitely more we could do too. I feel like we don't have anyone in this community who are super strong in that area yet. And so we have these meetings all the time where we're like, these are the things we think we should do, but we don't have anyone to do them. We don't have anyone to tell us if those things are even the things that will work or not. But I do think that like we need to figure it out. We just don't have the skill sets to do it.
Yeah.
That's okay. I think it would be good for us to stick with just like putting things on the list and almost like and not worry about how. Like it would be very kind
No
of stuff.
fixing, you're not allowed to fix it.
So I feel UI. That's Jeff's advice.
If you start by just like having 5 minutes at the beginning of every weekly meeting and say, hey, what are the narratives people have brought, have collected from their users and their friends of users and their friends of friends of users. Like, what have you heard people complaining about problems with websites and web technologies that you're using? What are the gaps that are out there? And just start kind of building with a list of narratives and a list of use cases and see what patterns emerge.
So I interjected, or something was part of a conversation earlier on about a payment processor system. And I think that needs to be accelerated. I mean, if you're gonna be working with nonprofits, we want donate funds and we want ways to payment process.
And that-
Easily, and I know that's not necessarily hardcore.
I'd be interested in working on that if we can find a client to help, a project.
Great, and so I think that just means in some way using our community to accelerate whoever's gonna build that to build it.
So we have,
So the other thing that I want to propose is a specific user summit. Like just put a stake in the ground, like get away from this Drupal blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
It's time to
Backdrop events.
put a stake in the ground, and I'm happy to be part of that.
And-
That's a good idea.
And
We've been asked about that since as long as Backdrop
Yeah.
has been around. Like, when are you going to decouple yourselves from
Yeah.
the Drupal events? And it's like, well,
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
I think we need to not decouple ourselves from the Drupal events. We
Well,
need
I
to
mean,
have
just do
our
it.
own.
Yes,
Because
exactly.
the Drupal community is still our target audience, so we need to
Sorry.
still talk to them. We
Let's-
can't be like, not talking to you
sorry.
guys anymore, but I think we should have our own thing.
I think this summit actually kind of works as sort of like tack on to BADCamp, not during the majority of it. If we do this at if we have a day summit or something before DrupalConf, so Backdrop people can arrive like a day earlier and go to the Backdrop summit at DrupalConf.
Yeah.
Or
It's interesting. Yeah. It's tough because they don't accept.
Alright,
Backdrop
let's
talks.
move on.
Okay.
We need to-
Let's reject.
Another thing to throw on the list, for me, the biggest blocker is still since CRM not really being fully supported. I think that's the case for Drupal 8 as well, so I think there's kind of a bit of a mess right now, and Neil knows more about it, but I think for now, just that's my thing, like trying to push it so we have some CRM in there will let a lot of clients switch to it, whereas right now they can't.
Is it absolutely?
I would like to add polish on it because we've made some advances with improving the core theme and stuff like that, and the website's okay, but I feel like we haven't reached a level of polish for people to actually think that we're
real.
We still look like kind of a developer-driven project. And that we need to have a level of polish on our designs in order to
For Backdrop the product,
both.
okay, everything.
I
Just
think
polish
our
it.
website and also the
And I'll say that people have called and talked to me, and they'll ask me, Drupal 7, Drupal 8, what should I do? And have you checked out Backdrop? Go, look at that, and I'll hear from them, and I'll get a response of, I'm not really. I mean, is this going to be around in a year and a half? And I think it's somewhere on the website is join the hundreds of people already using this, which that doesn't sound good. That's like 100. And, people want to see thousands or millions or something. And
confidence in the longevity of the project. It's actually in trust. It's actually one of our biggest problems in our entire state. It's all about affordability in the future and planning for when the next cycle comes around and not being screwed when that happens. Well, in order to not screw people, we need to keep being around. It's one of the most important things. It's our main selling point, but it's also our biggest problem that we have a hard time convincing
And
people.
I hear back from developers after I tell them to go check it out, and that's what I'm getting feedback from them is that that's what they're wondering, that's what they're feeling.
Yeah. Did somebody already say something? Case studies we're working on, at least that establishes credibility, and that it's if this is on these websites, then well, these people took the plunge and are on this platform, so I feel like I can trust it.
I think there's a bunch of other stuff we're hitting on too, that it's not just about putting more content on the website, we need to reiterate.
You're again trust.
Confidence.
Confidence is great.
I would say targeting audiences is something we need to do better. like, you know, if you're talking about like, you know, the nonprofits and the developers and the Drupal developers and the WordPress developers. And I think that if we have sort of landing page experiences for each of those, that make the case specifically for that audience. Like if you're a nonprofit looking at backdrop, go to backdrop /
Yeah.
But that's a priority. So like, you know, audience landing pages or something like that, you know.
Higher education.
More sparkling.
Pretty good, pretty clear. Push you way ahead. Projects.
It is nice that we have a goal.
Yeah, you know, that's actually
I do think that outreach to, you know, different shops. I don't think it's any budget for marketing.
There's no budget. But if we had somebody who understood how to help us make a budget and earn some money, we could have a budget and we could spend it on things. Like, this is very chicken and egg. I think we could make that happen.
I'm good at spending money. I can do that part.
I think another way of I think helped Drupal get out of, get big out of 6 was distributions. And I'm not suggesting that you guys start making unique distributions, but rather that you build full example cases of backdrop implemented towards a specific solution that is basically ready to go, step-by-step recipe, and people can see, oh, this actually could work for me, not just hypothetically, this might work for me. If you can then take that and maybe find it, or maybe find a use case to go and actually approach someone who looks like they need a website but has a big name, and say, hey, we'll just do this for free as a use case. The community will do it with a limited scope, build it, and then you can say, hey, these guys use our thing, and incidentally, we have a package that you can use exactly the same thing as what they're using. These steps, actually going out and doing the work on that, maybe sacrificing development work towards the backdrop core, spend time and energy on a specific use case effort, or even maybe possibly for a real individual. That's something that will get you far.
And with like some sort of install profile technical solution, like, but there the install profiles.
I mean, it could be.
Yeah,
Could be. But even if all you did was have a recipe.
Yeah, that's what I was saying. Like, backdrop install profiles could just be configuration. Default configuration where it adds a bunch of content types and views and stuff like that. So this sort of,
yeah, we have better tools.
Yeah.
Right.
We have good tools for that. We just don't have that.
But then you actually have to build some of those use cases. Or find some products out there in the world that really suck.
we need
almost every
distributions.
K-12 institution in the country uses this
We need
really crappy interface for tracking, their front page website and connection to back end things. And it's just like, if you could just interview a couple people who use that software, make the backdrop equivalent of it, and just say, hey, if you ever want to upgrade, try this. And they just do it and it works. That's how you get people doing stuff using your phone.
This today. No, there's no feedback form. Okay, well let's. You want to have the final word, Danny?
That's a question I will ask later. But
Okay.
while I am just very impressed with this.
Yes.
Okay. All right, yeah, me too.
Mm-hmm.
So let's go ahead for everybody. I'm really just happy that everybody showed up today. It's almost everybody stuck through the whole day, which is fantastic. It's great to see faces here and a lot of people that this is their first backdrop events. And yeah, we're doing more tomorrow. It's more like a hands-on training, like we're actually going to do site building, putting this in together. Wes is going to get into a little bit of doing some theming work and how themes and layouts all interact together. So if you're interested, we'll be doing more events tomorrow. Is it here again?
No,
It's at the
UC Berkeley Career Center.
Well, it's right across the street from the.
Yeah, it's not on campus, but it's on the outside of the street.
Well, anyway, you can check it out on the website. We're under the training section. Yeah, there you
Or
go.
follow us on Twitter, and we will go at 8 o'clock tomorrow morning with the address of where to go.
And where to park.
No parking. You
Oh.
gotta ride your bike.
You see the.
Not here.
You can ride your horse there.
Yeah.
I didn't bring my horse with me.
Today, but also a lot that is not at all the same. So, yeah, we love it. You guys, well, we also, even better, tell your, like, if people are busy and they're doing trainings Thursday and Friday, the big event starts on Saturday, and we also have a backdrop session. And if you know other people that are interested in hearing about backdrop, that intro that we give a variation combined demo during that session. So you guys have already pretty much all gotten that message. So get out the word and tell other people you should go to the backdrop session just to hear about backdrop.
Also, I have one request too, like if we are at the Drupal event talking about backdrop, I would love it if you guys could say we instead of you or they, if you're talking about the backdrop community. It's something that I think makes a big difference for the people who do like give their heart and soul for this thing. Don't say, oh, like, you know, you need to do whatever, or they are doing whatever. Say we, and it feels better as like, we're all, even if all you're doing is your feedback, we are doing this together. And I'd like to help kind of foster that as well.
That backdrop session is on Sunday at 1:30.
Thank you. Okay, that's it. We are going to, some people are going to go over at least to Jupiter.
Across the street.
Yeah, and it's right across the street.
There's an arch right there.
Yeah, and it's a great place to hang out. It's got a great patio.
And pizzas.
And pizzas.
We haven't had pizza for lunch.
Okay, well, thank you guys. That's it.
Thanks.
Good
Thanks, I'll see you tomorrow at the DevOps.
Yeah.
With, Brian, yeah. Johnson's, yeah. I don't know, how much started at 8 or 9?
Yes.
Yes, we are so early this morning.
Bye, everybody. Bye, everybody.
Right. I know it's 20 minutes to drive 3 miles.